Welcome to another episode of the Short and Convoluted History of, and today we're going to be discussing the Springfield M1903 bolt-action rifle, American. To give you a little bit of background, the Americans went into the Spanish-American War in the late 1890s with the M1893 Craig Jorgensen rifle. And it was notable for being the first bolt-action smokeless powder American battle rifle. Prior to that, they had used Springfield trapdoor rifles, which were basically single-shot rifles. The rifle, Craig Jorgensen's problems were immediately apparent in 1898 during that war when 750 Spanish regular soldiers armed with M1895 Mausers, I think it was, basically held off 15,000 U.S. soldiers at San Juan Hill, and they inflicted something in the neighborhood of about 1,500 casualties in just a few minutes. The Americans realized that the Craig Jorgensen, despite its advantages over previous rifles the American Army had used, obviously had some deficiencies, and they created a commission to investigate the adoption of a new rifle. After a lot of fits and starts, they finally came up with the M1903 Springfield, which was adopted in June 1903. Now, unlike they were so impressed by the Mauser rifles that the Spanish used that the Americans essentially copied the action. As you can see, it is a Mauser action. The telltale safety flag up here. So impressed by it that they essentially copied it, other than a few minor changes. Mauserwerke obviously wasn't very impressed, so they sued the United States government, and the agreement was that the U.S. would pay Mauser $250,000 in royalties, which basically went from about 1905 to 1909. So the rifle was used in World War I by the Americans. There were a number of different models. There was a sniper model, the M1903A3, which had a pretty weak 2.5 power scope. They also had different stocks. This is the traditional S pattern stock. They also had what was a pistol grip stock. And a number of other changes. They also changed the sights in later models, because these were great for one reason, but not so great in a battle situation, which I'll get into later. They were also used in World War II. I know everyone considers that to be the war that the Americans used the M1 Garand rifle, because it was adopted in 1936, but they didn't actually have enough Garand rifles to go into the war, so they issued M1903s to a lot of soldiers. Particularly in the Pacific, you'll find a lot of examples of these rifles there. And there were some units that actually preferred the M1903. The Rangers, there were several units in the Rangers which actually preferred using this rifle over the semi-automatic M1. Sniper actions of this rifle also saw action in Korea and Vietnam, and up until I think the late 1970s, a lot of US Navy ships also had stocks of M1903s, which soldiers would use, if they came across floating mines. This particular rifle, which you see here, is kind of a rare example of the M1903. It's called the M1903 Model 1. Basically, what happened was an American arms designer named John Peterson, who should be a lot more famous than he really is, created a device called the Peterson device, which basically turned this rifle into a semi-automatic firearm. It had a device which came out from up top here. I would show it to you, but I'll explain to you later why you're not going to see one here. And you'll see on the other side of the rifle, that's a little bit of stock. Right here, there's a cutout. And basically, the rifle was converted into a semi-automatic rifle, which fired 30 caliber pistol carbine rounds. They started producing them in 1918, but unfortunately, well, fortunately, I guess actually, World War I ended before they could actually be fielded, and they continued building these devices until about 1920. The Army realized that it really wasn't a practical device to begin with, so they took the 60,000 Patterson devices they built and basically destroyed all of them but a few. And today there's basically about 100 floating around with collectors. There's also some at the Ordnance Museum. Today, to find one of these devices, you'll basically spend about $40,000. So that's why I don't have one, a little bit beyond my means. So this has been called the best rifle of World War I. I would take issue with that. I've fired most of the rifles from the First World War. Russian, Austro-Hungarian, German, English, American, Canadian, Australian. I haven't fired French, so I can't speak authoritatively to their country. There are a lot of great things about this rifle. The action, not surprisingly because it's a Mauser action, is as smooth as butter. It is great. It also has a bolt which, once you close it, basically ends right where the trigger is, so your hand naturally falls to where the trigger is. What's not so great about this rifle are the sights, and this was remedied in later models, but this is basically a target sight for target shooting. It's not a war sight, what you would use on a battle rifle. And this is primarily because the Americans have to this day a doctrine where every member of the armed forces is expected to be a shooter. Whereas you in Russia, their doctrine basically is volume of fire. Americans believe in really accurate precision fire, which is why a lot of their rifles, even to this day, you know, you're expected to be able to shoot out to 300 to 400 yards accurately. In a battle situation, I'm not sure how realistic that is, but at any rate, this sight, although it is great for precision shooting, and I can attest to the fact that you can really put rounds accurately downrange at great distance. In a battle situation, it doesn't work as well because you don't have the time to line your shot carefully. You're basically snap shooting at targets in a war situation. And the Americans kind of realized that as great as these sights were for, you know, Camp Pendleton, they weren't as great in a war situation. So in the M1903A1, which was introduced again during the First World War as an upgraded model of this rifle, they replaced these precision target shooting sights with more a battle sight, to put it in its proper terminology. Now, is this the best rifle of World War I? I would argue that despite this rifle's great assets, and it has a number of great assets, if I was an American soldier coming into fighting into the First World War, I would have been very happy with this rifle. The action is as smooth as butter. It's well balanced. I mean, really, this is not a pain in the ass to carry, despite the fact that it's basically all steel and wood. This is not one of these new polycarbon fiber, rifles that we use today. It's all wood and steel, and it's very easy, though, to carry and to shoot. I would argue that the Lee Enfield, which was, I believe, introduced in 1917 by the English, was probably the best rifle. The action is short, moves incredibly fast. Like this rifle, when you cock it back, your hand basically falls to where the trigger is. And the sights are marginally better than this. I don't particularly care for the Mark 1 number 3 Lee Enfield sights. I prefer the number 4 ones. But they're still better than these ones when you're in a combat situation. I have rapid fired this rifle to try and simulate taking shots at distance, at targets moving and that stuff. It's not so easy to line up. Target shooting, though, it's fantastic. You can put together 3-inch groups easily with this rifle at 100 yards without even trying. Not so easy with battle sights in the middle of a war, though, or these precision sights in the middle of a war. So basically, that is the short and convoluted history of the M1903 rifle. Thanks very much, and I hope you have a great day. Safe shooting.